Welcome to Democratic Television, a program of the Santa Clara County Democratic Party that brings insights, perspectives, and attitudes of our always thoughtful Democratic guests. Today we're joined by Neil Struthers, the CEO of the Building and Construction Trades Council of a whole bunch of counties. Santa Clara County, San Benito County.
We'll stop there.
Let's stop there at this point. Yeah, that's good, because there's plenty to talk about within that context.
Yeah, I have some colleagues who may be a little excited if I had their county as well.
Right, yeah, you don't want to be a Mr. Pac-Man, and not on this show at least. Neil, thanks for being on the show. You're the executive officer of the Building Trades Council. So what does that mean?
Well, the Building Trades Council represents 23 different construction unions, everything from the laborers to the elevator mechanics, plumbers, electricians, sheet metal workers, cement masons, operating engineers, carpenters. So it's 23 different unions representing approximately 30,000 construction workers and their families in Santa Clara County. And my job is to represent them in an umbrella organization called the Building Trades Council. So we're somewhat of the political arm, policy arm, public relations, overall consensus builder, and we meet on a weekly basis, and I take my direction from the leaders of those unions.
Got it. So let's go back in time a little bit. What got you into this line of work? And let's go back before that even. So where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I was actually born in British Columbia, Canada, in a small little town up north. Both my parents were immigrants from the UK, my dad from Scotland, my mom from England, and at the time, Canada was trying to populate itself with skilled workers, so they had something called a $5 Canadian. So if you had a skill, my mom was a pharmacist, my dad was a mechanic, for $5 you could immigrate to Canada and become a Canadian.
Oh.
And there was a lot of opportunity there back in the 60s, early 60s. So that's where myself and my two brothers were born, in a small little town called Kitimat. My dad quickly got tired of the winters, and we piled into the Ford Econoline van in 1965 and drove as far south as we could, and we broke down in San Jose, and that's where we've been ever since.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that happened.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you know, you probably could have ended up in Juarez or something.
Well, yeah, they didn't make those cars the same way they do now. But my dad was quickly, found a job while the car was getting fixed, and we've been here ever since. I'm fortunate. Although my mom did tell me that they were really headed to San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara, but we ended up in San Jose, and the rest is history.
Well, congratulations.
And I am an American citizen. Became an American citizen, naturalized. So I am an immigrant.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Well, you were learning a lot in the first few minutes.
Yeah.
So you went to school in San Jose schools, public schools?
I went to public schools. I went to Prospect High School on the west side of town. I now live on the east side of town, so I've made the transition. I went from the west side of town to Willow Glen, and now I'm on the east side. Obviously, I have to live on the east side because my wife is Nora Campos.
The assemblywoman.
The assemblywoman, yes. And my brother-in-law is Javier Campos.
The council member.
Yes. So I went to school on the west side of town, Prospect High School. Got good grades, but at that time I had decided that I didn't want to go to college, that I wanted to work with my hands, I wanted to work in construction. I owe a lot of that to the fact that back in the 70s, and for a short time after that, they still had wood shop, metal shop, auto shop, all the vocational type programs that were offered at one time in the schools. And so that really got me interested in working with my hands.
Because unlike me, you did well in those courses.
I did well in those courses. I did well in in math and science as well. I mean, I had almost a 4.0 grade point average, and when I told my mom I wasn't going to take the SAT because I was going to go to Canada and be a lumberjack, she didn't quite understand, and I think she's gotten over it by now. But it was a big point of contention in our family that I wasn't going to go to college. In fact, none of my brothers did either. We all pursued vocations and had all done quite well in that area. But I understand today's environment is different. The measure of success in our community for parents is a college degree. I understand it. I mean, I'm the head of the building trades. I have a college fund set up for my 3-year-old son.
Yeah.
But not everybody is going to go to college, and not everybody wants to go to college. So there's there's a lot of dynamics that are in play. But I went, I moved up to Canada when I was 17 years old and pursued a number of jobs and realized that.
So you really were going to become a lumberjack?
Well, I never actually became a lumberjack. I worked in a gas plant, in a lumber, a sawmill. I worked on a pipeline. I did a number of things. And I realized real quickly after spending a winter there that, the combination, people tell you about the cold, and I think I could have got used to the cold. What I couldn't get used to was the winters are very short as it relates to daylight hours. So you get up in the morning, the sun wouldn't come up till 9 in the morning, and by the time you got home, it was already dark. So
was your dad saying, "I told you so"?
No, he wasn't telling me I told you. I think he knew that I wouldn't be there very long.
Oh, okay.
Coming from, people don't realize how good they have it living in the Bay Area based on the weather and the things to do and the opportunities and the education and just people in general and diversity. I don't think you find anywhere else in the world. And I've been in a lot of places, but it really came home when I, left for a year, realized, what am I thinking? And so I quickly moved back.
So you moved back to the San Jose, and what did you do in terms of career moves?
Well, I still wanted to get in construction, and I had done my research and realized that the best way to go about that is to serve an apprenticeship. And the only people that provide an apprenticeship are the unions. And so I did my research and applied and got in, and the rest is history. Served my apprenticeship and worked
So
my
what
way.
is an apprenticeship? What is, how do you apply, and what can you expect to learn? And is this something unique to all the building trades locals?
Yeah, apprenticeship is not just germane to construction, but the construction industry has perfected the apprenticeship model through collective bargaining. And so this is why unions are very important in job training, and particularly in the construction industry. So because training is very expensive, a single employer couldn't possibly train his entire workforce to the level he needs for two reasons. One, it's very expensive, but two, other employers would then poach those individuals once they were trained by offering them a higher wage. And so if you're investing your money in training, you can't afford to pay a higher wage. So, 50 years ago, the industry came together and unions worked with their employers, their counterparts, and put together jointly funded labor management groups that funded apprenticeships so that individual employers didn't have to fund apprenticeship. They funded it, but so did their competitors. So there was a level playing field, so people weren't poaching skilled workers from each other after they had been trained.
They didn't need to.
They didn't need to. So it really raised the bar and made this country similar to that of other industrialized countries. Apprenticeship is not new. I mean, it started out in Europe and it works very well in Europe as well and other industrialized countries. But because of that, employers in our industry can provide training. Without that, I think we would have a clear deficit in skills that would have bottom line effects to employers, not just construction employers, but employers in general. I'll give you an example. I was back east and I was getting a ride to the airport from one of my colleagues who was the head of the building trades in Texas.
The state of Texas.
This whole state of Texas. I said, well, what are you working on in Texas? What are your issues that are pressing? And he told me that his main focus was trying to stop H-2A and H-2B workers who were coming from the Philippines and from other Southeast Asian countries to do pipe fitting and welding for a lot of work on the Gulf Coast. And that was foreign to me because we don't have that problem here in California where we have imported workforce from foreign countries, skilled workers, because we have plenty of skilled workers. And what I realized was because Texas is what they call a right to work state, which we call a right to work for less state, which makes it very hard for unions to organize. That the prevailing wage in certain counties in Texas is as low as $10 an hour for a welder or a pipe fitter. And so nobody in their right mind that has any skills is going to go into a career that only pays $10 an hour. It's very dangerous, it's dirty, it's physical. For $10 an hour, no benefits, you're going to avoid that occupation altogether. And so they don't have any skilled workers by and large in Texas. And so in order to get things built down there, they have to import their workforce. And if you talk to a lot of high-tech manufacturers, you talk to a lot of contractors, there's a reason why there's a lot of things going on in Silicon Valley because they have a high-skilled workforce. They can turn a project around very quickly. They don't have to import a workforce. They don't have to go through those issues. So it's very hard to build high-tech facilities and very complicated things in other parts of the country because they don't have a skilled workforce. And one of the problems is they don't have apprenticeship and they don't have unions.
Now, I would think that employers in Texas would want that stability, that higher level of craftsmanship, and that dependability that they would get. What causes them not to do that and to work with your counterpart in Texas to put together a great program?
Well, I think they even recognize that it's gone too far, the race to the bottom, and that industry is to the point where now they have to import a workforce. It's not easily changed. There's a lot of individuals, a lot of companies involved, and there's a lot of sentiment that, that we don't want unions in Texas. There's a lot of other states that way too. But because of that, they've hurt themselves, in my opinion. They've hurt the middle class and the working class because, left to their own devices, the race to the bottom is going to happen unless we can bend that curve the other way, and that's where unions come in and collective bargaining. We're going to miss out on a great opportunity to put people back to work in this country in jobs that pay above the poverty level.
So we have about a minute left in this segment. What apprenticeship program did you get into?
I am a glazer by trade. So that's the guy you drive downtown and you see him hanging off the side of the building with a piece of glass in his hands trying to put it in that little hole there. That's what I did. We did all the aluminum and metal structures and the glass that goes in that. So anything to do with glass and aluminum and storefronts, skylights, etc., is the trade I come out of, and that's the apprenticeship I went through. It's a very esoteric trade, not a lot of people in that industry, but something I'm very proud of.
So I would love to go to your house sometime and see all the beautiful glass work and skylights, and you do take your work home with you, don't you?
No, I don't have anything glass in my house. I have
It sounds like you live in a prison.
No, I don't live in a prison.
Well, that's good. And on that note, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, more about the uniqueness of the building trades and the construction industry. And thanks again.
Thank you, Steve.
Be right back.
Hello, my name is Jerry McNerney. I'm the newest elected member of the United States Congress from Northern California. I represent the 11th Congressional District. I got involved in politics because my son encouraged me to do so. I'd never thought about doing that before in my life. And here I am now in Congress helping to change the direction of our country. If you would like to get involved in your country, we need you, we need your help, the community needs you. Please contact your local Democratic Party at 408-445-9500 and help make a difference. Thank you.
Welcome back to our show with Neil Struthers, the Executive Officer of the Construction and Building Trades Council of San Benito and Santa Clara counties, but not necessarily in that order. Neil, we were talking a little bit about you became a glazer and you did a lot of glass work and other kinds of things. And is the glazers program relatively typical of apprenticeship programs? In other words, it takes a few years to go through, you work while you're learning and...
Yeah, apprenticeship, just a thumbnail sketch of apprenticeship is, in order to be an apprentice, you have to be sponsored by an employer. So you have to have a job first. So you then work your way up the scale towards a journeyman rate. So you may start out at 35 or 40% of the journeyman rate, but you go to school at night or on the weekend or during the week 4 times a year. And this goes on for 3, 4, 5 years, depending on the craft. And some of the programs have 8,000 hours of on-the-job training and well over 1,000 hours in the classroom to complete your apprenticeship program.
So that's years and years of
Right.
Work.
So you gradually work your way up the pay scale based on doing well in school, doing well on the job, being dependable, and so forth. And if you reach those milestones, you continue to move up the food chain towards that of a journeyman level. And that's how the apprenticeship program works. And it's it's funded almost entirely through collective bargaining, through labor management, so as we discussed earlier around how training gets paid for. And in Santa Clara County, we did a survey a few years ago about how much money is actually spent on training in Santa Clara County for apprenticeship, and the number we had was $15 million is spent private money in our industry to train individuals just in this county. And so the state of California, it's obviously several $100 million, and across the country, it's hundreds of millions of dollars a year spent in apprenticeship training in the construction industry. These are non-government funds. These are funds generated through the industry through collective bargaining.
And what does it take to become an apprentice? What do you need? What kind of background or interest do you have to have?
Well, I think you have
besides a desire to work.
Yeah, I mean, right now the economy's not good. It hasn't been for some time, as you know, Steve, and there's a lot of people out of work. So we're not taking in a lot of apprentices at the moment because we have a lot of apprentices out of work. And our first obligation is to keep people working and to keep apprentices employed. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to bring people in while we still have people out of work. However, the economy is starting to pick up. We're starting to see some of that. So things will be picking up again. But you make application to the various craft. Each craft has their own apprenticeship program. Some are more coveted than others because of the wages and the occupation. For example, the mechanical crafts, electrical, sheet metal, plumbing, elevator constructor, have waiting lists of several hundred applicants, and they test. So you take a aptitude test, you do some other testing so that they rank individuals as to who's at the top of the list, who's at the bottom.
And so just what does it take to score high? What kind of aptitude are you looking for?
Well, in those crafts, typically math and just general spatial cognizance, right? So common sense type things. There has to be some vetting process because it's an industry, it's an occupation that if you don't know what you're getting into, you may decide it's not for you. It's very physical, it's very demanding. In our industry, unlike other industries, other unionized industries, there's no seniority, there's no bumping rights, there's no paid holidays, no paid vacations. You go to work, if you do well that day, you get invited to come back tomorrow. The employer determines who's qualified to work and who's not, which is unlike any other
It's not like the public sector, probably not like the private sector that does emphasize seniority.
Right. Well, those industries have other issues, and it's a much different environment, so they need those type of things to level the playing field for workers. In our industry, those would be the death blow to unions. To have unions dictating to employers who works and who doesn't, we wouldn't have unions in the construction industry.
So you're saying really that you will succeed and rise through the pay scales and confidence that you'll be asked to come back if you put in a good day's work. You know what you're doing, you're proficient, you're cognizant of others and safety and all that.
Right. I mean, it's a free market approach. I mean, if you don't perform, you don't work. And in our industry, if you're a carpenter or an electrician or a plumber or a glazer or a laborer or an operating engineer, you pick a craft, you're good at what you do, you also know what the market bears. And you know that union employers are paying a better total package for you and your family than a non-union employer typically. There's a few exceptions where non-union employers pay the same wage and benefit, but that's rare. And so the question is, who would you work for? And that's a rhetorical question. The question is, why would you work for less if you were more skilled? And particularly based on the fact that if you are skilled and you do perform, you will continue to work. Employers will keep you working. And where lesser skilled and lesser workers that have less motivation are typically let go first. And that's not to say in this economy that we don't have good workers out of work, because it's the economy. But in a good economy, the employer decides who stays and who doesn't. And in our industry, because it's the nature of it that one job to the next, the employer may not have the next job, so it's important that you perform well. They'll find something for you to do. So there's this natural Darwinism in our industry that I don't think exists in other unionized industries because they're different. We have to perform that way. And as I said, employers are willing to pay those wages and provide that training because they want quality. And as long as they get to determine what's quality and no one else, they'll continue to do it. The other difference is, unlike other unionized industries, the employers aren't obligated to bargain after the expiration of the contract, but they still do. I mean, they have the ability to walk away at the end of the agreement, but they don't. I mean, a few do once in a while, but on average, they don't because of the way our industry is set up. Their business model for a union employer typically is, I'm willing to pay a higher wage, but I need a higher quality worker.
Right.
And as long as I get that, that's what I'm going to do. And because we've leveled the playing field as it relates to training, and also health care and retirement, because those are also collectively bargained and done as a multi-employer plan, we've taken a lot of those things off the table for them so that their competition doesn't undermine them in those areas. And so we've created this level playing field for a higher quality contractor. And that's why, you know, in the Bay Area in California and other places where there's heavily unionized construction industries, you see a lot more development go on because the skilled workforce is here and people want to be here and people know they can get the job done. And that's where you see the quality contractors. Not to say that there isn't quality non-union contractors, but if you look at any of the projects that are getting built, the Apples, the Intels, the Ciscos, the Facebooks, the Googles, all these private companies, Stanford University, they do it with union labor. Not because they have to, but because the value is there.
Very interesting. Now, one of the concerns people might have about a construction industry is that the industry is motivated to construct, you know, the idea of paving over our natural environment. And I know there had been conflicts in the past between environmentalists or tree huggers and the construction industry. It feels like that's changed a lot under your leadership. What is the attitude of the building trades in terms of construction, the environment, and all that?
Well, you know, there's the perception, true, but it's not accurate because we as building trades realize, as individuals in this industry, that we have to build things to put food on the table. You know, without construction, we don't exist and we're out of work. But you can do that a number of different ways. And this idea that we have to pave over the grasslands and the green fields to do that is absurd. To us, we think that their buildings need to be reused, right? So torn down and build something new. And the more challenging the project is, the more likely you're going to find union labor on it. So just, you know, paving over a hillside and putting up housing is not, we don't really have a lot of that market share to begin with because it's on the food chain of construction is at the very bottom. Infill development is not. Infill development takes a higher level of developer and a higher level of contractor, and that's where we're going to find more of our people working. And besides, we have an obligation.
Now, what do you mean by infill?
Well, you know, higher density housing and construction. We think that we need to rebuild our urban cores first before we go out into the greenfield development. And we also have a responsibility to future people in our industry that there's actually thoughtful development, because without thoughtful development stops, and that doesn't do anyone any good. Doesn't do building trades any good. Doesn't do the environmental community. Doesn't do our communities any good. So we're all in favor of smart growth, and we think it creates good jobs, and there's no reason why we can't do that. So this idea that we're at odds with the environmentalists is not true. We actually think the environmentalists are the reason why we have smart growth. You know, left unattended and unfettered, we would be paving over hillsides, and I'm not sure that building trades workers would be doing that work because it's not as skilled, it's not as complicated, it's not as complex, and therefore you can hire a lesser skilled, lesser paid workforce to do that. And so it's not in our interest either to do that.
So in terms of educational opportunities, besides apprentice programs, are the building trades pushing other kind of college programs that are of interest?
Well, that's a good question. I said earlier in the show about how I got into the trades was based on a wood shop and a metal shop classes available to me when I was in high school, in fact, even middle school. Due to Prop 13, A to G requirements, just the whole budget issue around education, those classes are virtually non-existent. So we have to do other things to get people interested in our industry. And you know, a couple of facts, data points. When I got in the apprenticeship program, the average age was 20 years old. Today it's 30 years old. So we lost an entire decade in the last 30 years. And we need to address that because our workforce is getting older as well. And the tenure in construction is not necessarily that long. There are people, when they get, you know, into the late 40s and 50s, physically are unable to do construction work and be productive because that's what employers want to see. And so we're losing a lot of people that are having to retire early, but we're losing their institutional knowledge and they're not ready to retire. They're just having to change careers because they can physically no longer do this work. So we want to address both those issues. How do we get younger people in, and how do we keep people that have the institutional knowledge in the industry, whether it's working in, you know, swinging a hammer or working in an office. So we, as the building trades, led the effort, which is now a national program, to create a construction management bachelor's degree program for workers who have been through an apprenticeship and have on-the-job training of a lengthy period of time. Because the way it's set up now, if I'm a plumber, an electrician, or a carpenter, and I got 30 years into trade and my body's starting to break down, if I want to move into management, the requirement is that I have some type of formal education, typically a bachelor's degree in construction management. Well, unfortunately, the way our education is set up in California, there's no, the apprenticeship, even though there's 1,000 hours of classroom training typically, 8,000 hours of on-the-job training, and then tens of thousands of hours in job experience, doesn't translate into any college credit, or if so, very few. So we've set up a program. It's somewhat complex. I'm not sure I can get into all the details here, but we found a way to give those individuals college credit so that they can enter as a junior at the National Labor College, and in 2 years, through an online program with some facilitation on a local level, get a bachelor's degree in construction management.
So we have about a minute left. Are there some websites that you can throw up that you can direct people to, or maybe they'll just magically appear on our screen?
Well, there's 2 websites. You know, we started a nonprofit. Our Building Trades Council worked with local educational leaders and business in the construction industry to form a nonprofit called the Santa Clara Construction Careers Association. And the website is S4CA.net.
Okay.
And then there's the Building Trades website, which is SC, Santa Clara BTC, buildingtradescouncil.org.
Great.
And you can go to either one of those and get information.
Okay. Well, Neil, thanks for being on the show. The time went too quickly. Good luck.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for watching Democratic Television. Give us a call at 408-445-9500 or visit our website, www.sccdp.org. Help make a difference, and we'll see you on the campaign